The gym went silent. Not the polite silence of a crowd waiting for something to start. The wrong kind of silence. The kind that fills a room after something irreversible has already happened. A delivery driver in muddy boots stood in the center of Forge Combat Academy. Around him, 60 elite fighters. In front of him, the gym's reigning champion, flat on his back, gasping, staring at the ceiling like he was trying to remember which way was up. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because nobody in that room could explain what they had just witnessed. If you want to know who this man really is, subscribe right now, hit that like button, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Don't go anywhere. This is only the beginning. The rain came down the way it always did in November. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just relentless. The kind of cold drizzle that soaked through everything and made the world feel smaller than it actually was. Puddles had formed along the cracked curb outside the strip mall on Callaway Street, dark water reflecting the orange glow of a CVS sign that buzzed and flickered every few seconds, like it was about to give up. Logan Carter sat in the driver's seat of his 2011 Honda Accord with the engine idling and a stack of thermal delivery bags wedged between the passenger seat and the dashboard. The car smelled like French fries and wet upholstery. The heater worked, but only on one side. The left vent blew cold air no matter what season it was, and Logan had learned to live with that the same way he'd learned to live with a lot of things. He checked the app on his phone. One delivery left. Forge Combat Academy, 4 orders, corporate account, 3.2 miles. He exhaled slowly through his nose, pulled the gear shift into drive, and didn't say anything because there was no one to say anything to. Logan was 38 years old and looked 45 on bad days. He had brown hair that needed cutting, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor since Tuesday, and a scar that ran along the left side of his neck, thin and pale, almost invisible unless the light caught it right. His hands were thick, the knuckles scarred in ways that didn't come from gym training. His posture in the driver's seat was the kind of straight that didn't come from good habits. It came from years of wearing body armor so long that slumping became physically impossible. He drove carefully. He always drove carefully. Ellie was at home with the babysitter, and the one rule Logan lived by was simple: get home. That was the whole rule. That was the only thing left that mattered. He'd built his entire life around that single sentence after everything else had been stripped away. The career, the team, the purpose. The woman he thought would be there when he came back from his 3rd deployment. She wasn't. He couldn't blame her entirely. He wasn't easy to live with. He wasn't easy to be around. He still wasn't. But Ellie was 7, and Ellie thought he hung the moon, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The Forge Combat Academy occupied the ground floor of a converted industrial building on Merchant Avenue, the kind of neighborhood that used to make things and now mostly hosted CrossFit gyms and artisanal coffee shops trying to pretend otherwise. The Academy's signage was tasteful and expensive. Brushed steel lettering backlit in red, a logo that looked like it cost someone a significant amount of money to design. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Logan could see the gym floor. Mats, heavy bags, a full MMA cage in the far corner. And people, a lot of them, maybe 60 fighters and trainees moving through warm-ups or watching a group of older teens spar near the far wall. He parked along the curb, pulled the thermal bags from the passenger seat, and got out into the rain. The main entrance was a set of heavy glass doors, the kind that opened with a satisfying pneumatic hiss. Logan pushed through them and immediately registered the smell: sweat, industrial cleaner, rubber mats, and the faint metallic tang of athletic tape. The reception desk was unmanned. The lobby was small, a glass case displaying trophies, a mounted TV showing fight footage on loop, a framed photo of someone holding a regional belt. He checked the order. Leave with front desk or staff member. Do not enter main floor. There was no staff member. He stood at the entrance to the main gym floor for a moment, the thermal bags hanging from both hands, rain dripping slowly from the hem of his windbreaker onto the floor. He didn't want to go in. He especially didn't want to go in looking the way he looked. Boots caked in street mud, jacket faded to a color that no longer had a name, hair damp against his forehead. But the order said 4 people. Someone had paid for this. And Logan got paid per delivery. He stepped through. The first thing he noticed was the mat. The gym floor was covered in high-end interlocking tiles, dark gray with the Academy logo printed in red at intervals. They were clean. Immaculate, actually. The kind of floor that people clearly took pride in. The second thing he noticed was that his left boot, the one with the compromised tread on the outer edge, left a full muddy print on the mat with his very first step. He stopped immediately. Of course. He shifted the bags to one hand, crouched down, and was already pulling the edge of his windbreaker to wipe the mark when he heard the voice. Hey. Not loud, but the kind of voice that expected to be listened to. Logan looked up. The young man walking toward him was maybe 23, 24. Built like someone who had spent the last 5 years doing nothing but training. Wide shoulders, thick neck, the kind of lean muscle that photographs well and functions even better. He was wearing the Academy's branded gear, black and red, with the name Brooks printed across the chest of his compression shirt. His dark hair was pulled back. His expression was the specific kind of contempt that came from never having been told no by anyone who could make it stick. Tyler Brooks. Logan didn't know the name yet. He would. Behind Tyler, a cluster of guys his age had stopped their training to watch. That was the first tell. The way they repositioned themselves like an audience taking their seats. Yeah, you, Tyler said, stopping about 6 feet away and looking down at the muddy print with an expression like he'd found something dead on his windshield. You tracking mud in here? I apologize, Logan said, keeping his voice even. I'll clean it up right now. I just need to drop this order with someone. You need to clean it up right now, Tyler repeated, with the particular emphasis of someone who wanted everyone around them to notice they were repeating something. A few of the guys behind him made sounds of quiet amusement. You see what this floor costs? You see what we do on this floor? I do, Logan said. I'm sorry. It was an accident. He set both bags down carefully against the wall, well off the mat, and looked around for something to wipe the print with. He found nothing immediately useful, so he pulled the hem of his own jacket down and crouched to clean it himself. That's when he heard the footstep, close, deliberate. Tyler had walked up behind him while he was crouched down. Logan registered the positioning without turning. He'd spent too many years in environments where knowing where people were without looking at them was a survival skill. You got a name on the bag? Tyler asked. Because I didn't order from... He glanced at the thermal bag, squinting at the logo. Dragon Palace. There are 4 orders. I have names. Logan stood back up and checked his phone. Martinez, Hollis, Chen, and Brooks. A beat. That's me, Tyler said. The contempt in his expression shifted slightly into something more complex. The mild annoyance of someone who'd ordered food and then found out the food had witnessed him being unpleasant. He took the bag Logan offered without saying anything else. Logan picked up the remaining 3 bags and looked around. Can you point me toward Martinez, Hollis, and Chen? I can, Tyler said, when you're done cleaning my floor. A few of the guys behind him laughed. Actual laughter this time, not just sounds. Logan didn't respond to that. He went back to the muddy print and crouched down again, using the inside of his jacket lining this time, methodically working the mud up from the mat. The floor cleaned up more easily than he expected. 60 seconds of work, and it was gone. He stood. Clean. Mostly clean, Tyler said. Logan looked at him for one quiet moment. Tyler was eating something from the bag, a spring roll apparently, which struck Logan as oddly specific, and watching with the comfortable boredom of someone who had run this particular playbook before and found it reliable. I'll leave the rest of the orders at the front desk, Logan said. Have a good night. He turned to go. You know what I hate? Tyler said, louder now, making sure the room could hear. Guys who come in here tracking mud on everything and then act like I'm the one being unreasonable. He looked back at his teammates. Right? Like, know your lane, bro. Know your lane. Logan stopped walking. Not because the words hit him. They didn't. Words from 23-year-olds had stopped hitting him around the time he was carrying a wounded teammate through a valley in eastern Afghanistan at 2 in the morning with 2 hours of sleep and 4 years of combat behind him. He stopped because in the 3 years since he'd been doing delivery driving, in the hundreds of stops at dozens of gyms and restaurants and offices and apartment buildings, nobody had pushed it quite this far while he was still in the building. He turned back around. I apologized, Logan said. I cleaned the floor. The orders are delivered. He held up the remaining 3 bags. Tell me where your teammates are and I'll be out of your gym in 2 minutes. My gym, Tyler said, drawing the word out with evident satisfaction. That's right, my gym. He walked a slow half circle, casual, performing for the audience that had now swelled. More people had drifted over from the far side of the floor. You know how long I've been training here? 6 years. You know what I've won? He gestured vaguely at the far wall where Logan could see a display of belts and medals. You know what you've won? Silence. Nothing, Tyler said pleasantly. You've won nothing. You deliver food. Somewhere near the back wall, someone made a low "oh" sound. Logan set the remaining bags down on the nearest bench. His voice, when it came, was completely flat. That's a fair point. He took his phone out and updated the app. Order partially delivered. Will attempt remaining drops. You're not going to say anything? Tyler pressed, reading Logan's calm the way people always read it, as weakness, as absence, as a vacuum to fill. Come on, man. Defend yourself. Where's your pride? My pride is somewhere else tonight, Logan said, typing the customer names into the search bar to find alternate contacts. Same place yours probably should be. He didn't look up when he said it, but the room heard it. The laughter this time had a slightly different texture, still aimed at Logan on the surface, but with a hairline crack of uncertainty running through it. Tyler felt that crack. He walked forward, closed the distance to about 8 feet, and said, You got something to say to me, delivery boy? And then, because everything that came next would have to be understood in the context of what happened next, Tyler Brooks reached out and shoved Logan Carter in the chest with an open palm. Not a light push. A real one. The kind meant to make a man stumble backward, catch himself on his heels, maybe knock over one of the food bags. Definitely look small in front of 60 people watching. Logan didn't stumble. He didn't catch himself. He just stopped. Absorbed the force like it had somewhere to go inside him that most people didn't have, and stood exactly where he'd been standing. There was a pause, half a second, maybe less, in which Tyler's expression went from contemptuous to briefly, genuinely confused. Then Logan grabbed Tyler's extended wrist. What happened next took less than 3 seconds and was almost impossible to follow in real time. Logan didn't swing. He didn't punch. There was no wind-up, no telegraphed motion, no dramatic setup. His left hand closed on Tyler's wrist and rotated. A precise, leveraged rotation that had nothing to do with strength and everything to do with geometry, forcing Tyler's elbow to bend the wrong direction just enough to break the push completely. At the same time, Logan stepped in. Not back. In. Closing the distance Tyler had expected to control, moving to Tyler's outside in a single balanced step that planted Logan in a position most untrained people couldn't have gotten to in 10 moves. His right forearm came across Tyler's chest. Not a strike, just placement, and his hip rotated through. Tyler left the ground. For a moment that the room's collective memory would return to for years, Tyler Brooks, regional grappling champion, 6-year Forge Combat Academy veteran, owner of the belt displayed on the far wall, was airborne. He landed on his back across the mat with a sound that was somehow both loud and final. Not the crash of a knockdown, but the heavy, airless thud of a body that had been placed exactly where someone intended to put it. He didn't get up immediately. He stayed on his back, staring at the ceiling, mouth working like he was trying to remember a word he'd forgotten. Logan stood still. His breathing was unchanged. His hands were at his sides. His expression was the same one he'd walked in with. Tired, patient, waiting for something to be over. The gym was completely silent. Not a shuffle. Not a whisper. Not the sound of athletic tape shifting or weight racks settling. 60 trained fighters stood in total, absolute silence, and stared at the delivery driver in the muddy boots. Logan picked up the 3 remaining food bags from the bench. He walked to the nearest fighter, a broad-shouldered guy in his late 20s who was standing near the wall with his mouth open, and read the name on the top bag. Martinez? He said. The guy blinked. Yeah. Logan handed him the bag. Then found Chen and Hollis in the same manner, walking through the silent crowd, reading names, handing bags over like a man finishing his shift, which is exactly what he was doing. At the door, he paused. He turned back to the room, not to Tyler, who was now sitting up slowly with the help of 2 teammates, but to the room in general. The floor's clean, Logan said. Have a good night. He pushed through the glass doors and walked back into the rain. The Honda Accord was cold again by the time he got back to it. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment without starting the engine, his hands resting on the wheel, rain tapping against the windshield in irregular patterns. His right hand, he noticed distantly, was shaking slightly. Not from fear, not from adrenaline exactly, from something older than both of those things. The particular tremor that lived in his hands sometimes, showing up uninvited in quiet moments after any situation that woke up the part of him he worked very hard to keep asleep. He pressed the heater button out of habit. Cold air came out of the left vent. He sat with it for a moment, then picked up his phone and accepted the next delivery. Panda Express. 2 orders. 1.8 miles. He pulled out of the parking spot and drove carefully into the rain, and the lights of Merchant Avenue slid across the wet hood of his car. And nowhere in the city of Ravenport did anyone yet understand what they had just seen. Except possibly the man holding a phone that was already lighting up with a notification he hadn't read yet. Inside Forge Combat Academy, a 17-year-old training assistant named Kevin had already uploaded the video. And somewhere across the city, in a coffee shop on Halstead Street, a man named Daniel Mercer sat alone at a corner table with a half-eaten sandwich in front of him, his phone face down beside his coffee, completely unaware that in approximately 4 hours, that phone would vibrate with a text message that would stop him mid-sentence. The message would contain a video, and a single line of text from his training director. "You need to see this. I think I recognize the footwork." Kevin Marsh was 17 years old, worked the front desk at Forge on Tuesday and Thursday evenings for $12 an hour, and had made exactly one decision in his life that he would later consider genuinely significant. He'd been standing near the equipment cage when it happened, close enough to see the whole thing, far enough back that nobody noticed his phone was already up and recording. He'd started filming 30 seconds before the shove, some instinct telling him that whatever was building between Tyler and the delivery driver was going to pay off one way or another. He'd been right about that. He posted the video at 8:03 p.m. with the caption, "Bro came to drop off food and left dropping bodies and a single flame emoji." He thought maybe his high school friends would share it. Maybe it would get a few hundred views by morning. He went back to sweeping the mat near the equipment cage, earbuds in, and didn't think much more about it. By 9 p.m., the video had 40,000 views. By 10:30, it had cleared 200,000, and 3 separate fight analysis accounts had reposted it with their own commentary. One of them, a channel called Combat IQ with 4 million subscribers, titled their repost, "This delivery driver just used textbook SEAL-level CQC on a regional grappling champ and then walked out to finish his shift." The caption included a timestamp and a frame-by-frame breakdown of Logan's footwork, the wrist rotation, and the hip placement that had put Tyler on the floor. Kevin found out how big it had gotten when his manager called him at 11:30 and told him, very calmly, not to come in on Friday. Logan didn't know any of this. He finished his shift at 9:47 p.m., turned the app to inactive, and drove home through rain that had finally started to ease into something lighter, more mist than actual rain, the kind that caught in the headlights and made the road look like it was breathing. He stopped at a Quick Trip on Brennan Avenue to get a bag of ice for his knee. The left one. The one that had a small piece of shrapnel in it that the surgeons at Bethesda had decided wasn't worth the risk to remove, and that Logan had learned to manage with ice and ibuprofen and a particular way of coming downstairs that minimized the grinding sensation. He stood in the frozen foods aisle, holding a 5-pound bag of crushed ice against his thigh, through his work pants, staring at the drink cooler without really seeing it. His reflection in the cooler glass stared back at him, a tired man in a wet jacket, holding ice in a gas station at 10 o'clock at night. He looked exactly like what he was. He bought the ice, a bottle of water, and a package of peanut butter crackers because he hadn't eaten since noon, and he drove home. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building on Keswick Street that had seen better decades. The elevator had been out of service for 6 weeks. Logan climbed the stairs carefully, left knee first on each step the way his physical therapist had shown him 3 years ago. Ice bag tucked under his arm, bags in his other hand. The stairwell smelled like someone's dinner, something with garlic and onions, and a television murmured behind a door on the 2nd floor landing. He unlocked his door and eased it open quietly. The babysitter, a college student named Rosa who lived 2 floors down and charged $10 an hour and was worth every cent of it, was asleep on the couch with a textbook open on her chest. The TV was on low. Some cooking competition show, people in white jackets staring at plates with intense expressions. Logan set his bags down on the kitchen counter and paid Rosa in cash, an extra 20 because it was late, and he was a person who still believed in that kind of accounting. She left without fully waking up, which he appreciated. He checked on Ellie. She was in her bed in the smaller room, the one with the glow-in-the-dark stars he'd spent an entire Saturday evening sticking to the ceiling in what he'd been assured was an accurate representation of the night sky over Ravenport. She was curled on her side with one arm around a stuffed elephant named Gerald, her dark hair spread across the pillow. She breathed in the slow, total way that only children and people with completely clear consciences managed. Logan stood in the doorway for a moment, just stood there. Then he pulled the door to its usual position. Not fully closed, never fully closed, because she'd gone through a phase 2 years ago where closed doors at night scared her. And even though the phase had passed, Logan kept the habit and went to sit on the bathroom floor with his back against the tub and the ice bag on his knee. This was his version of decompression. 15 minutes, cold floor, ice on the knee, nowhere to be. Most nights it worked reasonably well. Tonight his hands wouldn't stop moving, not shaking exactly, more like they kept shifting position on their own, fingers curling and uncurling against his thighs, the way they sometimes did when his nervous system had been activated and hadn't fully received the memo that the situation was resolved. He pressed them flat against his legs and breathed through it. He thought about Tyler Brooks on his back on that mat, mouth open, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the sound the room made, that particular quality of silence that he recognized from a very different context, from rooms and streets and compounds, where silence after sudden violence meant something completely different than it meant in a gym in Ravenport. He hadn't wanted to put the kid down. That was the honest truth. And Logan was generally committed to honest truths because dishonest ones had a way of compounding. He'd wanted to walk out with the food delivered and the situation left at an annoyance. He'd been fully prepared to absorb the contempt and the comments and the know your lane and the crowd laughing at the delivery driver in the mud-stained boots, because he'd absorbed worse from harder men in worse circumstances, and because Ellie needed him to come home and not to have made anything worse. But the shove had changed the math. Not because it hurt. It didn't, not physically. But because there was a version of Logan Carter that lived below the surface of the delivery driver, below the tired father, below every quiet and deliberate choice he'd made in the 3 years since his discharge. And that version of him did not respond well to being pushed. It responded. That was the problem. It responded with a speed and efficiency that the rest of him couldn't quite catch in time. 3 seconds, maybe less. He hadn't decided to do it. That was what nobody who hadn't been through the same training would ever fully understand. After enough years, enough repetitions, enough real situations where the decision-making process had been compressed down to something below conscious thought, you didn't decide. You just moved, and your body already knew where to go and what to do and how much force was appropriate. And by the time your brain caught up, it was already over. Logan leaned his head back against the edge of the tub. The ice was making his knee ache in the good way. The way that meant the swelling was going down instead of building. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about the last time the thing below the surface had come up this fast. A parking lot in Norfolk, 2 years ago. A man who hadn't taken Logan's refusal to engage as a final answer. That situation had ended badly for the man and had cost Logan $600 in legal fees and a 3-week period of anxiety. So bad he'd started waking up at 3 a.m. and sitting in the kitchen with the lights on until sunrise. He was not going to do that again. He was not going to let tonight be that. He got up off the bathroom floor, put the ice bag in the freezer, and went to bed. Sight. He woke at 5:52 a.m. to the sound of his phone vibrating on the nightstand with enough frequency to suggest it had been doing this for a while. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, assembling himself, then picked up the phone. 14 missed calls. 11 text messages. His voicemail indicator showed a number he'd never seen on his own phone before. He sat up. The texts were from numbers he didn't recognize, which meant they'd gotten his number from somewhere, which was already a bad sign. He opened the first one. "Are you the guy from the Forge video? Bro, you need to DM me." He closed it and opened his delivery app out of reflex. His rating was still 4.87 stars. That was fine. That was the only metric he cared about right now. He put the phone face down on the nightstand. From down the hall came the sound of Ellie moving around. The particular series of sounds that meant she was awake and looking for Gerald, whom she occasionally left in the bathroom during her nighttime visits and then couldn't find in the morning. Logan got up, found Gerald wedged between the toilet and the wall, and delivered him to Ellie's room, where she accepted the elephant with the gravity of someone reunited with something genuinely important. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine." "Your eye is doing the thing." "What thing?" "The twitchy thing. It does that when you're tired or when you're thinking about something bad." Logan touched the corner of his left eye involuntarily. "It's not doing anything." Ellie gave him the look she'd apparently been born knowing how to give, the one that communicated patient, affectionate skepticism, and tucked Gerald under her arm. "I want the cinnamon ones for breakfast." "We don't have the cinnamon ones." "We should get the cinnamon ones." "I'll add them to the list," Logan said, which was what he always said, and she accepted this with the dignity of someone who understood that certain battles were long games. He made her oatmeal with brown sugar because that was the closest approximation to cinnamon ones he could produce. And while she ate at the kitchen table with a library book propped open against her glass of juice, he stood at the counter with his coffee and picked his phone back up. He didn't call any of the unknown numbers. He didn't read the texts. He searched the video instead because he needed to understand the scope of what he was dealing with before he made any decisions. He found it in 11 seconds. He watched himself walk through the Forge Combat Academy doors. He watched himself leave the muddy boot print. He watched the whole exchange with Tyler, the contempt, the jokes at his expense, the crowd gathering. And then he watched the 3 seconds that had apparently broken the internet overnight. The video had, as of 6:08 a.m., 4.3 million views. Logan set the phone face down on the counter again. He drank his coffee. He stared at the window over the sink where the morning light was coming in gray and thin, the sky still undecided about what kind of day it wanted to be. "Dad?" He turned. Ellie was watching him over the top of her library book with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Yeah." "Are you in trouble?" He looked at her for a moment. She was 7 years old and already understood with some frequency that the world her father moved through was not always simple. He didn't know if that was because she was perceptive or because he was not as good at hiding things as he thought he was. Probably both. "No," he said. "I'm not in trouble." She held his gaze for one more second. The same patient, assessing look, which he was increasingly convinced she'd gotten from some part of his own face that he couldn't see himself, and then went back to her book. He refilled his coffee and went to stand by the window. 4.3 million views. By the time he'd walked Ellie to school and come home and sat down at his kitchen table with a second cup of coffee, it was 7:45 a.m. and the number had become 6 million. A segment from a cable sports commentary show had been clipped and posted separately. 2 men in suits at a desk breaking down the footage frame by frame, disagreeing loudly about whether Logan's technique was Krav Maga, MC Map, or something else entirely. One of them said, "That's not gym training, that's not competition training, that's not even standard military hand-to-hand." He paused the clip before the other one could respond. His delivery app showed a full queue of orders available. He accepted 3 and got his jacket. The phone rang while he was pulling on his boots. A local number, but one he didn't recognize. He let it ring. It stopped, then immediately rang again. He answered it because sometimes persistence was the universe's way of telling you that ignoring something wasn't the same as it going away. "Mr. Carter." The voice was male, middle-aged, measured, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to without raising itself. "My name is Daniel Mercer. I own Forge Combat Academy." Logan sat very still with one boot on and one boot off. "I got your number from our delivery platform account," Mercer continued. "I want to be upfront about that. I also want to be upfront about the fact that I'm not calling to threaten you or to discuss legal action, so you can exhale." "I wasn't holding my breath," Logan said. "That's fair." A short pause. "I watched the video. I also watched it about 8 more times after the first watch, paying attention to specific things." Another pause, this one longer. "I want to meet with you, in person, today, if possible." Logan looked at his one boot on the floor. "Why?" "Because I recognize what I saw, and because I think you probably haven't had a conversation with someone who recognized it in a while." The line was quiet. Rain had started again outside, light against the window. "My brother served," Mercer said. "Team 3. He was killed in 2009 in Kunar province. I grew up watching him move, watching him train, watching the way he carried himself. I watched that video 8 times because I kept seeing things that reminded me of him. The voice stayed level, but something underneath it shifted slightly. The kind of shift that happened when someone was telling the truth about something they didn't talk about often. I'm not trying to put anything on you. I just want to talk. Logan didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, a car went by on Keswick Street, tires wet on the asphalt. I have deliveries, Logan said finally. I know. I'm not asking you to cancel them. Mercer's voice was patient. There's a gas station on the corner of Brennan and 9th, Kessler's. They have a coffee counter inside. Meet me there tonight at 9 after your shift, 30 minutes. You can walk out whenever you want. Logan thought about the video and its 6 million views. He thought about the 14 missed calls. He thought about Ellie asking if he was in trouble, and the way she'd looked at him with her patient, assessing 7-year-old eyes over the top of her library book. I thought about what it felt like to be seen by someone who recognized the thing he worked very hard to keep invisible. 9 o'clock, Logan said. I'll be there, Mercer said, and hung up. Logan put his second boot on, went to work. The day was long in the particular way that days were long when your mind was elsewhere. He drove his routes. He delivered food. He said have a good one to strangers in lobbies and doorways, the same way he always did. And nobody looked at him any differently than they ever had. A man in a faded jacket with a thermal bag and a phone mount on his dashboard. And he was grateful for that in a way he hadn't expected to feel. 3 times, at red lights or while waiting for an elevator, he checked the video's view count without meaning to. 8 million. 11 million. By 4 p.m., 14. He stopped checking after that. At a delivery stop near Calhoun Park, a residential high-rise with a slow elevator and a concierge who always looked mildly offended by his existence, he sat in the lobby waiting area while the elevator made its slow way down, and he let himself think about what Mercer had said. I recognize what I saw. The specificity of that. Not impressive moves or you clearly had some training. The things that people who didn't know said. But I recognize it. Past tense. Recognition implies prior knowledge. It implies having seen the specific thing before, in a specific context. Mercer's brother, Team 3. Kunar, 2009. Logan had not been in Kunar in 2009. He'd been somewhere he was not going to think about right now, doing something that was not on any public record and would not be ever. But he knew Kunar. He knew what 2009 looked like in Kunar. He knew the shape of that kind of loss. The elevator arrived. He got in, pushed the button for the 9th floor, and stood looking at his own reflection in the scratched metal of the elevator door. The scar along his neck. The jaw that still needed shaving. The eyes that were doing, probably, the twitchy thing that Ellie had noticed. He made the delivery. He went back down. He got in his car and sat for a moment with the engine idling, hands on the wheel. He thought about what it might feel like to sit across a table from someone who didn't need anything explained, who already knew the particular grammar of the life Logan had lived, the weight of it, the cost of it, the way it stayed in your hands and your reflexes and the corners of your sleep even when you were doing everything right to leave it behind. He put the car in drive. The rain had stopped somewhere around noon and hadn't come back. The evening was cold and clear, the kind of clear that felt earned after a gray day, and the streetlights on the far side of Calhoun Park were coming on one by one as the sky darkened. Logan drove back into the city and thought, for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, that he might actually be curious about what someone had to say to him. That alone felt strange. That alone felt like something worth paying attention to. He didn't know yet what Mercer would offer him. He didn't know yet what he would do about the video or the missed calls or the slow, unstoppable spread of his own face across the internet. A face he'd spent 3 years trying to make anonymous, to make ordinary, to reduce to a name on an app and a star rating and a series of on-time deliveries. What he knew was that his shift ended at 8:30, the Kessler's gas station was 6 minutes from his last scheduled stop, and that he had exactly enough time to get there without rushing. And somewhere across the city, in the converted industrial building on Merchant Avenue, Tyler Brooks was sitting alone in the empty gym long after everyone else had gone home, rewatching the same 3 seconds of footage on his phone with an expression that had started the night before as humiliation and had spent the last 12 hours quietly becoming something else. Something more uncomfortable, more honest, and considerably harder to dismiss. Tyler Brooks sat alone in the empty gym for a long time after the last light in the locker room went out. The building had that specific silence that large spaces get when everyone leaves. Not quiet exactly, more like the absence of a noise you'd stopped noticing until it was gone. The ventilation system cycled on and off. The fluorescent lights over the mat hummed at a frequency that you only heard when there was nothing else to hear. Somewhere near the back wall, a heavy bag that someone hadn't secured properly swayed slightly in the draft from the HVAC return vent, its chain ticking against the ceiling mount every few seconds in a rhythm that was almost but not quite regular. Tyler sat on the edge of the mat with his phone in his hand and watched the video for the 11th time. He'd told himself the first 3 times that he was studying it clinically, looking for the technical breakdown, understanding what had happened so he could categorize it, file it, move past it. That was how he processed losses in competition. He watched the footage, identified the error, and trained the correction, clean and systematic. The problem was that what he kept seeing on his phone screen didn't look like a technique. It looked like something that lived below technique, something that didn't have a name he could find in any curriculum he'd ever trained under. He watched his own arm get rotated. He watched the moment his balance left him, a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible. And then the step, the hip, and then the ceiling of Forge Combat Academy rushing toward him from the wrong direction. 3 seconds. He'd been training for 6 years. He had a regional belt on the wall 30 feet from where he was sitting. He weighed 210 and had a 42-inch vertical, and had been told by 3 different coaches that his natural proprioception was exceptional. The delivery driver had done it in 3 seconds without appearing to try. Tyler turned his phone face down on the mat and stayed there in the hum and the tick of the empty gym, and the thing he was feeling, the thing he'd been trying to outrun since last night by calling it embarrassment, and then anger, and then a fluke, and then a cheap shot, trying on each word like a coat that didn't fit, finally settled into its actual shape. He was scared. Not of Logan Carter specifically, not of being hurt. He'd been hurt plenty. He'd had his ribs cracked by a training partner, his nose broken twice, his confidence dismantled and rebuilt so many times that the process had become almost routine. This was different. This was the specific fear of having encountered something you didn't have a framework for, something that existed in a register so far above your own current capacity that your training hadn't even given you the vocabulary to understand what you'd witnessed, let alone how to survive it if it happened in earnest. Because Tyler had felt it in that fraction of a second before the floor came up to meet him. He'd felt, in the grip on his wrist and the geometry of the movement, the difference between someone who trained to fight and someone who had trained for years, in situations where losing meant something that no competition mat ever replicated. He picked his phone back up. He didn't rewatch the video. He opened a browser instead and typed, Navy SEAL hand-to-hand combat training. Then he sat there in the empty gym and read for a long time, and the reading didn't make him feel better. Kessler's gas station sat on the corner of Brennan and Ninth like it had been there since the street was dirt and had simply refused to update its opinion of itself. The exterior was original 1980s construction, brick fascia, a canopy with 2 of the 4 overhead lights working, a hand-lettered sign in the window advertising fountain drinks for 79 cents that had been there so long it had faded to near illegibility. The interior smelled like burnt coffee and motor oil, and the particular combination of floor wax and old carpet tile that Logan associated with places that were clean but had never been renovated. The coffee counter was a 6-stool setup along the right wall, with a commercial machine that looked like it had survived a natural disaster and a rotating rack of prepackaged pastries. 2 of the stools were occupied by a man in a transit authority jacket staring at his phone, and an older woman with a canvas shopping bag who was reading an actual physical newspaper with the concentration of someone diffusing something. Logan came in at 8:58, 2 minutes early, and ordered a black coffee from the teenager behind the counter, who handed it to him in a paper cup the size of a small bucket without making eye contact. He took the stool at the far end of the counter, facing the door. Daniel Mercer walked in at exactly 9 o'clock. He was older than Logan had expected from the voice. Mid-50s, maybe, with gray at both temples and the kind of build that suggested he'd once been athletic and had maintained enough of it to still read that way. He wore a plain dark jacket, no Academy branding, dark slacks. He looked around the coffee counter, found Logan at the far end, and walked over without hesitation. He sat on the stool one over from Logan, leaving the one between them empty, which Logan appreciated in the specific way of someone who noticed that kind of thing. "Mr. Carter." "Logan's fine." Mercer nodded and ordered a coffee from the teenager, who handed it over with the same economy of attention. He wrapped both hands around the cup and looked straight ahead at the pastry rack for a moment before speaking. "I want to say something before we get into anything else," he said. "And I want you to know I mean it straight, not as a setup to something." Logan waited. Tyler was out of line. What he did was embarrassing, and I'm embarrassed by it. And the fact that 60 people stood there and let it happen in my gym is something I'm going to be dealing with internally for a while. He paused. "You were patient, more patient than most people would have been, and you didn't escalate beyond what the situation required. I noticed that." "You watched it 8 times, Logan said. "You probably noticed a lot of things." "I did." Mercer turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. "I noticed that when Tyler shoved you, your first movement wasn't offensive. You controlled the arm, you removed the threat, you set him down. You didn't follow up. You didn't humiliate him beyond what the situation already was." He paused again. "That's a choice. A trained choice. Most people, even trained fighters, don't make that choice cleanly when they've been pushed in front of a crowd." Logan drank his coffee. It was bad coffee, burnt and slightly bitter, but it was hot, and that was what mattered. "What branch?" Mercer asked. Not what Logan had expected to be the next question. He looked at Mercer. Mercer was looking at the pastry rack with the studied neutrality of someone who'd asked the question but wanted to make clear they'd accept whatever came back from it, including silence. "Navy," Logan said. Mercer nodded once, slowly. "Special operations?" The question was careful, not presumptuous. The phrasing of someone who understood that some things weren't confirmed out loud. Logan didn't answer that directly. "I was in for 12 years. Mercer received that without pushing it. He took a sip of his coffee, set it down, and after a moment said, "My brother Marcus was with Team 3 for 7 years. He was killed on a direct action mission in Kunar province in November of 2009. He was 31. A beat. He would have been 47 this past March." The transit authority man at the other end of the counter got up and left, the door swinging shut behind him with the sound of the traffic on 9th Street bleeding in briefly and then cutting off. "I'm sorry," Logan said. "Yeah." Mercer's voice stayed level in the way that old grief made voices level, not from lack of feeling, but from having worn the feeling down to something smooth through long use. "I grew up watching Marcus train. Our father thought it was dangerous and impractical, and he said so, often, and Marcus just kept training. By the time he shipped out the first time, he moved differently than anyone I'd ever been around. Not just the combat stuff, everything. The way he scanned a room when he walked in, the way he stood in lines, the way he could be completely still in a way that most people can't manage for 30 seconds. He paused. "When I watched your video, that's what I saw. Not the technique, the stillness." Logan turned his cup in his hands. "How long have you been out?" Mercer asked. 3 years. "Daughter?" Logan looked at. "You mentioned on the phone." "I didn't, actually. I noticed you were in a hurry to get somewhere when you left the gym. And the way you move. Men with kids move differently than men without them. More careful about the knees going upstairs. More aware of what's behind them when they're in public." Mercer shrugged slightly. "I'm probably reading too much into it." "No," Logan said. "Daughter, 7. "Her mother?" "Not in the picture." Mercer nodded. Nothing more about that. Logan appreciated that too. They sat for a minute in the comfortable silence of two people who weren't in a hurry and didn't feel the need to fill space with sound. "What do you want from this conversation?" Logan asked finally. Mercer reached into his jacket pocket and set a business card on the counter between them. It was plain. The Academy logo, his name, a phone number, nothing else. "I run a program out of the Academy," he said. "Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings. Veterans, active law enforcement, a few firefighters. It's not public. It's not competitive. No belts, no rankings, no performance anything." He glanced down at the card, then back at the pastry rack. "A lot of the guys in it are carrying things they don't talk about in normal life. Combat stuff, line of duty stuff. They train together because it's one of the few places where they don't have to explain the weight of what they're carrying to someone who's never carried anything heavier than a gym membership. Logan looked at the card without picking it up. Tyler won't be there, Mercer added. He trains in the regular program. The Thursday and Saturday group is completely separate. That's not what I was thinking about, Logan said. What were you thinking about? Logan was quiet for a moment. Outside, a truck went by on 9th, loud enough to rattle the window slightly. I've been out for 3 years, he said. I've been trying to be something that functions in the regular world without... He stopped, chose a different construction, without bringing a lot of that with me. And how's that going? Logan thought about the 14 missed calls. He thought about his hands shaking in the Honda Accord in the parking lot of Forge Combat Academy. He thought about the $600 legal bill from the incident in the Norfolk parking lot and the 3 weeks of 3 a.m. kitchen vigils after it. It's going, he said. That's not the same as going well. No, Logan agreed. It's not. Mercer picked up his coffee and took a long sip. I'm not trying to recruit you. I'm not trying to build something around your skill set or make use of you. The program doesn't need anything from you. Some of the guys in it have been through more than I can imagine, and they still show up on Thursday evenings and work with each other, and they go home and they sleep a little better than they otherwise would. He set the cup down. That's it. That's the whole offering. Logan picked up the business card. He looked at it for a moment. The logo, the phone number, the name Daniel Mercer in plain serif type. And then he put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. They finished their coffees. Mercer paid for both without making a thing of it. They walked out together into the cold, clear night and stood for a moment on the sidewalk outside Kessler's, their breath visible in the air. The video's going to keep spreading, Mercer said. You know that. I know. People are going to try to find you. Fight promoters probably. Maybe press. I know that too. You need anything from me on that front? Anything I can do to keep your name out of the Academy's public-facing stuff? Tell me, and I'll do it. Logan looked at him. Mercer met the look without flinching, and Logan had learned enough about people to recognize when someone was saying a true thing as opposed to a useful-sounding thing. I appreciate that, Logan said. Mercer nodded once, the way men who weren't comfortable with extended sentiment concluded things. He offered his hand. Logan shook it. They went their separate directions in the cold, their footsteps on the sidewalk going opposite ways until they were too far apart to hear sound. Logan drove home with the heater on and the radio off. He was 2 blocks from his building on Kiswick Street when his phone, in its mount on the dashboard, lit up with a notification, not a call. A text message from a number in the 404 area code that he didn't recognize. He didn't read it at the stoplight. He parked, climbed the 3 flights of stairs with his left knee protesting the second-floor landing the way it always did, and let himself into the apartment. Rosa was awake this time, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, textbooks spread across the surface in the controlled chaos of someone mid-semester. She looked up when he came in, started to say something, and then visibly reconsidered. What? Logan said. Nothing, she said. You okay? Fine. Why? You look... She paused again, choosing carefully. Like you've been thinking about something for a long time. Long day, he said, and paid her, and she gathered her things and left with the tactful efficiency he appreciated about her. He checked on Ellie. Asleep. Gerald present and accounted for, stars glowing on the ceiling in their approximation of the Ravenport night sky. He went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the counter and read the text message. It was 3 lines, no introduction, no context, just 3 lines from the 404 number. Saw the video. We need to talk. Not about a fight, about what's coming. You don't know me, but I know your work. All of it. Call when you're ready. Or don't. But you need to know someone out there knows who you are. Logan read it twice. He set the phone down on the counter. He stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking out at the lights of Kiswick Street, the amber street lamp haloed with cold air, a car parked half on the curb, a cat moving along the fence line of the building next door with the supremely self-possessed unhurry of something that belonged exactly where it was. He thought about what all of it meant. He thought about what your work meant, applied specifically to him by someone he'd never met, in a text message at 10:30 at night. He thought about the part of his service record that wasn't a service record, that existed in a different category of documentation, in offices he'd never been invited back to, signed by names he was prohibited from using in conversation. He turned the phone over on the counter so the screen faced down. He drank his water. He was not going to be able to sleep. He already knew that. His body knew that before his mind had finished confirming it, the particular wired alertness that had settled into his chest sometime around the second reading of that message. The same alertness that used to come in the hours before a mission when everything was staged and ready and the only remaining variable was the signal to move. He pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table in the dark apartment with the street lamp light coming in through the window. And he stayed there for a long time, the Mercer card in his jacket pocket and the phone face down on the counter, listening to the building settle around him and the distant sound of a siren moving somewhere across the city, getting farther away. Somewhere across that same city, in a fourth-floor apartment in the Westerfield district, a man Logan Carter had never met sat in front of two computer monitors with a half-eaten container of takeout on the desk, beside him, and a phone on the other side. The phone he'd used to send 3 lines to a number he'd obtained through channels that were not available to ordinary people. And he was watching the video of Forge Combat Academy on one monitor and a different document on the other. The document had a header. The header was redacted, blacked out completely. Below the redaction was a photograph. The photograph was several years old, taken in a context that was not a gym and not a parking lot and not a gas station on the corner of Brennan and 9th. The man in the photograph was younger, thinner, harder around the eyes. But it was recognizably the same face. The man at the monitors zoomed in on the video, froze it on the frame where Logan had already rotated the wrist and was mid-step. 1 foot planted, 1 lifting, the whole geometry of what was about to happen already locked in. Then he looked at the document, then back at the video. He reached for his phone, not to send another text, to make a call. The line rang twice before someone picked up. "It's him," the man said. "I'm sure." A pause on the other end. "Then we move to the next step," the voice on the other end said. It was calm and professional and utterly without inflection, the voice of someone for whom this kind of conversation was routine. "Find out if he's still operational. He's driving food deliveries in Ravenport." "I didn't ask what he's doing. I asked if he's still operational." The man at the monitors looked at the frozen frame on his screen. The mid-step, the planted foot, the geometry of a man who had not forgotten a single thing. "Yeah," he said, "he's operational." The call ended. The frozen frame stayed on the screen in the dark apartment in the Westerfield district, and the takeout container went cold on the desk. And somewhere on Keswick Street, Logan Carter sat at his kitchen table in the dark and didn't sleep, and didn't know yet that the 3 years he'd spent trying to be ordinary were about to run out of road. He didn't sleep until almost 3 in the morning, and even then it wasn't real sleep. More like his body powering down in stages while his mind stayed partially online, running the text message in a background loop the way an old computer ran processes. You couldn't quite see, but could feel in the way everything else slowed down. "You don't know me, but I know your work. All of it." He woke at 6:12 to Ellie standing beside his bed in her pajamas with Gerald under one arm, informing him with the gravity of a small person delivering significant news that there was no more orange juice. "Okay," Logan said, from somewhere near the surface of consciousness. "We need orange juice." "I'll get some today." Today? Or today like last time when today meant 4 days? He opened one eye. She was watching him with the same patient, assessing expression that had apparently been factory installed at birth. He sat up slowly, the ceiling of his bedroom arriving in stages. Today, he said. She accepted this and left. He heard her in the kitchen, the particular sound of cabinet doors being opened and closed in a search pattern. His daughter had inherited, from somewhere in her genetic makeup, the operational habit of checking all available resources before committing to a conclusion. Logan rubbed his face with both hands and sat on the edge of the bed. His phone showed no new messages from the 404 number. He'd expected either more texts or a follow-up call overnight, and neither had come. And somehow the silence felt more deliberate than additional contact would have. He made breakfast. He made Ellie's lunch. He walked her to school in the thin morning cold, her hand in his, her breath making small clouds that she aimed at things experimentally. A mailbox, a parked car, the air in front of a man walking a dog, as if testing what could be fogged. He came home. He sat at the kitchen table with his third coffee of the morning and the phone face up in front of him and the business card from Daniel Mercer beside it, and he stared at both of them and made a decision that was less a decision than an acknowledgement of something he'd already understood the night before at the kitchen table in the dark. He picked up the phone and called the 404 number. It rang once. "Carter," the voice said, not a question. "You have 30 seconds to tell me who you are and how you have this number," Logan said. "After that, I hang up and block it, and we don't have a conversation." A short pause. Then, "My name is Garrett Voss. I work for a private security consulting firm called Halcyon Group. We're contracted to a number of federal clients I'm not going to name on an open line." The voice was male, controlled, probably early 40s, precise in its diction in the way of someone who'd spent years in environments where imprecise language caused problems. "Your number came from a source I'm also not going to name. What I will tell you is that the source had your number because of your service record, the part of your service record that doesn't exist in the public accessible system." Logan was quiet. "You still there?" Voss said. "Still here." "Good. I want to meet in person, today if possible. I know that's fast, I know you have no reason to trust me, and I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to sit across a table from me for 1 hour and listen. After that hour, you get up and walk away and I never contact you again. That's the offer." "What do you want from me specifically?" "I want to talk to you about a consulting arrangement, short term, defined scope, significant compensation." A beat. "And I want to talk to you about what happened at Forge Combat Academy, because the video that's currently sitting at 22 million views has attracted attention from people beyond fight fans and sports commentators. And you need to understand the shape of that attention before it arrives at your door." The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Somewhere on Keswick Street, a delivery truck was backing up, its alarm beeping in patient metronomic intervals. "Where?" Logan said. "There's a diner called Hartley's on the corner of Dunmore and 6th. Private booths in the back, 11 a.m. "I know it." 1 hour, Voss said. "That's all I'm asking." "I'll be there at 11, Logan said. "If anything about the situation when I arrive doesn't feel right, I leave. No discussion." "Understood," Voss said, without any indication that this condition inconvenienced him. "See you at 11. The call ended. Logan set the phone down and picked up the Mercer card and held both things in his mind for a moment, the card and the call, and thought about the particular irony of spending 3 years trying to disappear and then ending up with a viral video and 2 separate men who knew exactly who he was in the span of 18 hours. He went to get ready. Hartley's Diner had been on the corner of Dunmore and 6th since before Logan was born and would probably be there after he was gone. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, a pie case up front with handwritten labels, a coffee machine that produced something technically categorizable as coffee. The lunch crowd didn't start until noon on weekdays, so at 11 a.m. the place was occupied by 2 retired men at the counter sharing a newspaper in companionable silence, a woman in scrubs eating eggs with the efficiency of someone between shifts, and a booth in the back corner that had been chosen specifically because it had clear sightlines to the entrance, the kitchen door, and both windows. Logan clocked all of that before he reached the booth. The man in it was already there, a few minutes early, Logan noted, which told him something. Medium height, lean, wearing civilian clothes that were slightly too coordinated in a way that said trying to look like he wasn't from somewhere specific. Brown hair going gray at the temples. A face that had been outside in difficult conditions for a long time. He looked up when Logan approached and didn't smile. "Carter." "Voss?" Logan sat across from him and accepted the coffee the waitress offered without looking at the menu. Voss already had a cup in front of him, barely touched. "You're earlier than I expected," Voss said. "I was here at 10:45, Logan said. "I walked the block twice." Voss's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes adjusted. A recalibration. "Okay," he said. "Fair enough." "Talk," Logan said. Voss wrapped his hands around his coffee cup and looked at the table for a moment, assembling something, not nervously, deliberately, the way someone organized a briefing. "You served 12 years, he said. "Your official record shows a standard special warfare career. Multiple deployments, qualified in Halo and combat diving, 3 Valor decorations, medically separated due to a knee injury sustained in the line of duty." He paused. "That's the file that exists. There's a second file that doesn't technically exist, the one that covers the last 4 years of your service." Logan's face didn't move. I've read both, Voss said. I'm not going to recite the second one back to you. I'm just establishing that I know the scope of what you did and where you did it, so we don't have to dance around it. How does a private contractor access a file that doesn't technically exist? Logan said. The same way files that don't technically exist get accessed, through people who have reasons to share them. Voss looked up from his coffee. I know that makes you uncomfortable. I understand why. And I'm telling you now, flat out, that what I'm here to offer has nothing to do with any of that work specifically. I'm not here to pull you back into anything classified. I'm not here on behalf of any agency. Halcyon is private, our clients are private, and what I'm proposing stays in that lane. Then why bring up the second file at all? Because I needed you to know I'm not operating on incomplete information. Voss finally picked up his coffee and drank. The video has 22 million views as of 9 this morning. By Friday, it'll probably double. 3 people reached out to my firm in the last 12 hours asking about the identity of the delivery driver in the footage. One of them is a fight promoter. One of them is a journalist from a national outlet. The third is someone I recognized and didn't like recognizing. Logan watched him. The third one's name doesn't matter right now, Voss said. What matters is that he works for a private intelligence contractor. Different firm than mine, different clientele, significantly less ethical operating standards, and his interest in you isn't professional curiosity. He reached out to us because Halcyon has a reputation for locating former special operations personnel, and he was fishing to see if we could identify you. He set his cup down. We didn't confirm anything, but he already knew enough to ask the right questions, which means he has a source too. The waitress came by with the coffee pot. Logan let her refill his without breaking eye contact with Voss. She left. You're telling me I have a problem I didn't have before Thursday night, Logan said. I'm telling you the problem existed before Thursday night, Voss said. Thursday night just turned a light on. Logan thought about the dark apartment in whatever building this third man worked out of. He thought about being a frozen frame on someone's monitor. He thought about, is he still operational? And the answer that came back. What does he want with me? Logan said. My best guess? The same thing a lot of people want with former operators who are no longer operating under institutional protection, leverage, or recruitment, or both, depending on what he thinks you're worth and what he thinks you need. Voss's voice was flat, clinical, not dramatizing it. You're a single father driving a delivery car in Ravenport. You don't have an income that suggests financial security. You have a service record that suggests capability. To someone like him, that combination is interesting. Logan was quiet for a moment. Outside on Dunmore Street, a bus went past, filling the windows briefly with its orange and white side. What's Halcyon's interest? He said. Voss nodded like he'd been expecting this to be the next question. We're building a small training and assessment team for a private security contract. The client is a logistics company with operations in 3 regions that have gotten significantly more complicated in the last 18 months. They need people who can train their security personnel in realistic threat scenarios. Not bodyguard stuff, not corporate security theater. Actual preparedness, threat assessment, close quarters response, contingency protocols. He paused. The job is domestic. No international travel required. The schedule is flexible. We're talking 2 days a week maximum, designed around whatever primary employment you have. The compensation for 2 days a week is 6 times your current monthly delivery income. Logan looked at him steadily. You know my delivery income. I know your approximate delivery income based on market rates and your app history, which someone with access to the platform's data could pull. A slight pause. I'm not going to pretend I came to this meeting without doing homework. No, Logan said. I can see you're not. A beat. I'm not interested in being someone's asset, Logan said. I did that for 12 years. I was very good at it, and it cost me most of the things I valued outside of it, and I'm not doing it again. This isn't an asset relationship, Voss said. It's a contractor relationship, defined scope, defined term, clear deliverables. You maintain complete autonomy, no tasking outside the agreed scope, no requests for information on third parties, no... I've heard the pitch, Logan said. The pitch always sounds like that. Voss stopped talking. He looked at Logan for a moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not defensively, but with the adjustment of someone who recognized they'd run into something real. You're right, he said. The pitch does always sound like that. The honesty of it was unexpected enough that Logan picked up his coffee just to have something to do with his hands. Look, Voss said, differently now, with some of the briefing room precision dialed back. I'm not going to tell you this is something it isn't. The job is real, and the money is real, and the scope is what I described. But I'm also aware that I'm asking a man who walked away from the life to walk back towards something adjacent to it, and that's not a small ask. He turned his cup in his hands. I've been in your position, different circumstances, but I know what it costs to rebuild something ordinary after the other thing. I know how much you protect it once you've got it. He glanced at the table. That's why I'm telling you about the third man. Not because I need you scared, because you have a daughter and you deserve to know the shape of what's out there. The diner hummed around them. The two retired men at the counter had moved on from the newspaper to what sounded like a detailed disagreement about a local sports team. The woman in scrubs had left. The pie case rotated slowly in its display counter, showing the same 4 pies it had probably shown every day for 20 years. Tell me more about the third man, Logan said. Voss's posture shifted incrementally, recognizing the implicit decision in the question, not commenting on it. His name is Reese Cutler. He runs a firm called Ardent Solutions, incorporated in Delaware, primary operations unclear. He pops up in procurement records for 3 or 4 defense-adjacent contracts over the last decade. Nothing that ties clearly to anything, which in itself is a pattern I've learned to pay attention to. He met Logan's eyes. He's the kind of man who collects information about people as a form of capital and spends it when the timing is right. Has he identified me by name? Not yet. As of last night, he had the footage and a general profile. Former military, likely special operations, currently civilian. He doesn't have your name or your location. A beat. That window is probably 24 to 72 hours, depending on his resources. Logan thought about Ellie at school right now, sitting at a small desk with Gerald stored in her backpack because she'd started carrying him, and her library book, and her lunch that he'd packed this morning with the note he always put in it. A small drawing, different every day, because she'd told him once that she liked having something to look at during lunch that wasn't a sandwich. Today's drawing had been a small cartoon elephant, because Gerald, "What do you need from me to make the window longer?" he said. Voss blinked once, the first time he'd shown anything close to surprise. "You're asking how to protect your position. I'm asking what keeping my name off his board looks like. It looks like keeping your head down and not giving him additional surface area to work with." Voss leaned forward slightly. "The video is already out there. That's not reversible. But the connection between the footage and your identity is still a gap he has to bridge. The longer that gap stays unbridged, the more likely his attention moves to something more immediately useful." He paused. "If you agree to work with Halcyon, we can actively monitor his interest level and give you early warning if he gets close. That's a resource you don't currently have access to. And if I don't agree to work with Halcyon, then I give you what I know today, we shake hands, and you handle this on your own." He said it without pressure in it, matter of fact. "I meant what I said on the phone. 1 hour, then you walk away if you want." Logan looked at him for a long time. Voss didn't move, didn't fill the silence, didn't soften or harden. He just sat there and let Logan look, which was the right thing to do. "I need a week," Logan said. "For what?" "To think about the job, to make some arrangements," he paused, "and to deal with something else that came up yesterday that I need to resolve before I make any other decisions." Voss considered this. "The week is fine. Cutler isn't moving fast yet." He pulled a card from his jacket pocket, plainer than Mercer's, just a phone number, and set it on the table. "Call when you've decided. Either way." He picked up his coffee, finished it, and set the cup down with the finality of someone who was done with this portion of the meeting. "One more thing." "Yeah." "Tyler Brooks." Voss said it levelly. His coach filed a report with the Academy's insurance carrier this morning about the incident. The language they used was careful, but the implication was potential liability on your part. Logan looked at him. "You've been busy." "It's what I do." No apology in it. "I wanted you to have the full picture. Mercer is the owner. I don't know his position on the report yet, but you should probably know it exists." Logan stood up. He left cash on the table, enough for both coffees, plus the kind of tip that acknowledged a waitress who'd done her job without making anything harder. He picked up Voss's card. "I'll be in touch," he said. He walked out into the cold morning on Dunmore Street and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in his jacket pockets, and breathed. He drove to Forge Combat Academy. Not because he'd planned to. He found himself on Merchant Avenue at 11:50 with no delivery scheduled until 1 p.m., and he sat in the parking lot across the street and looked at the building and thought about the insurance report and thought about Tyler Brooks, sitting alone in the empty gym the previous night, rewatching the footage. He got out of the car and crossed the street. The front desk was staffed this time. A young woman who looked up when he pushed through the glass doors with the expression of someone who recognized him immediately, which was a new experience that Logan found specifically unpleasant. "I need to speak with Daniel Mercer," he said. "Tell him Logan Carter is here." She picked up the desk phone without saying anything else. Mercer came out from the back office 2 minutes later. He looked at Logan with the expression of someone who'd been expecting this and wasn't sure yet whether to be relieved or concerned. "I know about the insurance report," Logan said, before Mercer could open with anything. Mercer's jaw tightened slightly. "My training director filed it without consulting me. I found out this morning." He paused. "I'm not pursuing it. The report gets withdrawn today." "That's your call." "It is." Mercer looked at him steadily. "You have my word that's handled." Logan nodded once. "Is that why you came?" Mercer said. "Partly." They stood in the lobby for a moment, the trophy case to one side, the mounted TV running its loop of fight footage on the other. Through the interior window that looked onto the gym floor, Logan could see the early afternoon training session in progress. A dozen people moving through drills, the controlled rhythmic sound of bodies working. And then he saw Tyler. Tyler was on the far side of the gym, alone, working a heavy bag with the mechanical focus of someone who wasn't training for anything specific. I wasn't performing for an audience. He wasn't moving with the loose confidence Logan had seen the night before. He was moving like someone who was trying to work something out of his system through sheer physical effort, which was a strategy Logan recognized from personal experience and could have told him didn't work. As if he felt the attention, Tyler glanced up through the interior window. He saw Logan. He stopped hitting the bag. For a moment, the two of them looked at each other through the glass, the delivery driver and the regional champion, and the distance between them was maybe 40 feet of air and a pane of tempered glass, and whatever had shifted in both of them in the 20-odd hours since the mat. Tyler said something to the training partner nearby. The partner looked through the window, looked back at Tyler, and nodded. Tyler unwrapped his right hand and walked toward the lobby door. He came through it and stopped a few feet from Logan. Up close, in the flat lobby light, he looked younger than he had on the gym floor the night before. Younger and considerably less certain of the space around him. He didn't look at Mercer. He looked at Logan. "I owe you an apology," he said. The words came out slightly too quickly, like he'd been rehearsing them and was trying to outrun the rehearsal. "What I did was..." He stopped, reset, tried again with something that sounded less prepared. "I was a jerk. I was worse than a jerk. I had an audience and I used it and I picked someone I thought wouldn't push back." He held Logan's gaze, which appeared to cost him something. "I was wrong about that. About all of it." Logan looked at him for a moment. "Yeah," Logan said. "You were. A beat." "I'm not interested in making this a bigger thing than it is," Logan said. "You're young. You're good at what you do. Don't let being good at something make you think you understand everybody who walks through your door." Tyler's jaw worked for a second. He nodded. "You could have done more than you did," Tyler said. And this part clearly wasn't rehearsed because his voice changed register halfway through. "When you had me down, you could have..." He stopped. "I know," Logan said. "Why didn't you?" Logan thought about Ellie eating her breakfast with the library book propped against her juice glass. He thought about Get Home as a life philosophy. "Because I didn't need to," he said. Tyler absorbed that. He looked like he was filing it somewhere specific, somewhere he'd be returning to. "I'd like to train with you," Tyler said. "Sometime, if you'd ever..." "Let's see," Logan said. Not a yes, not a no. Something in between that left the door open without committing to what was on the other side of it. He looked at Mercer. "Thursday," he said. Mercer's expression shifted into something that wasn't quite a smile but moved in that direction. "Thursday," he confirmed. Logan put his hands in his jacket pockets and walked back through the glass doors into the afternoon cold. Behind him, through the glass, he could feel both of them watching him go. The owner who had lost a brother and the champion who was just beginning to understand what he didn't know. And he didn't look back. He crossed the street to his car, sat in the driver's seat, checked his app. The 1 p.m. delivery was a restaurant near Calhoun Park. Easy route, no stairs. He started the engine. The left vent blew cold air. He pulled out onto Merchant Avenue and drove, and the city moved past his windows the way it always did. And Logan Carter was the same man he'd been yesterday, and the day before, and every day for 3 years of careful, deliberate ordinariness. Except that he had 2 cards in his jacket pocket now, and a name he'd have to look at carefully, and a Thursday evening on his calendar for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, and something in his chest that was not quite hope, but was adjacent to it, and that he hadn't felt in long enough that he'd almost forgotten it had a shape. He made the delivery at 1:07 p.m., 6 minutes ahead of schedule. The app gave him 4.5 stars. The 4.5-star delivery sat in Logan's head for about 3 blocks before it stopped being funny and went back to being just a number. He had 2 more drops before the day wound down. A pharmacy order to a high-rise on Fenwick, then a grocery run for an elderly woman on Pruitt Street who always met him at the door and always asked if he'd eaten, which he found consistently disarming in a way he couldn't fully explain. He completed both on schedule, accepted her offer of a cookie because refusing it had never felt like the right call, and drove home through the late afternoon with the heating doing its usual half-functional job and his mind running the day's inventory. 2 cards. 1 name, Reese Cutler, that he needed to think carefully about. 1 Thursday evening that he'd committed to without entirely meaning to. 1 apology from a 23-year-old who might actually mean it. 1 decision about Garrett Voss and Halcyon Group that had a week's runway but felt like it was getting shorter by the hour. And somewhere under all of it, the thing he hadn't let himself look at directly yet. The question of what it meant that for the first time in 3 years, he hadn't spent an entire day trying to make himself invisible. He'd walked into Forge Combat Academy in the middle of the morning and talked to Mercer and stood in a lobby and looked Tyler Brooks in the eye and said what needed to be said, and then he'd driven away and completed 2 deliveries and accepted a cookie from a woman named Mrs. Albrecht, who called him dear without irony, and none of it had cost him the ordinary life he was trying to protect. That was new information. He wasn't sure yet what to do with it. He picked up Ellie from school at 3:15. She came through the gate with her backpack riding low on her shoulders the way it always did. She refused to use both straps, which was a battle Logan had attempted and abandoned, and Gerald's gray ear visible through the mesh side pocket where she kept her water bottle. She climbed into the passenger seat and buckled herself in with the self-sufficiency of a person who had opinions about needing help, and then looked at him. "You got orange juice," she said, spotting the grocery bag in the back seat. Today, he said. She approved of this with a brief nod and pulled her library book out of her backpack. She read the entire ride home without speaking, which was fine. Logan drove and didn't need the radio and didn't need to fill the silence, and the late afternoon light came through the passenger window at a low angle and made Ellie's dark hair look warm, and for approximately 6 minutes on Keswick Street, the accumulated weight of the last 48 hours sat somewhere else entirely, and Logan Carter just drove his daughter home. That evening, after dinner and after Ellie was in bed and the apartment was quiet, Logan sat at the kitchen table with the Voss card and his phone and spent 45 minutes doing what he should have done before the Hartleys' meeting: research. Halcyon Group had a minimal web presence, which in itself was a data point. A registered LLC in Virginia, a professional-looking website with no names on it beyond a generic contact form, 3 press mentions in trade publications focused on private security and defense contracting. All 3 mentions were neutral. No controversies, no litigation records he could find, no former employees complaining publicly about anything. He searched Garrett Voss. Found almost nothing, which was also a data point. A man in that line of work with no digital footprint was either careful or protected or both. He searched Ardent Solutions and Reese Cutler. Ardent had more of a presence than Halcyon, which struck him as the wrong approach for that kind of firm, but was consistent with Voss's characterization of Cutler as someone who operated with different standards. There were procurement records, publicly accessible government contract databases showing Ardent as a subcontractor on 3 separate defense-adjacent projects over 8 years. The dollar amounts were mid-tier. The contracting agencies were obscure enough to be interesting. Reese Cutler appeared in 2 photographs. One was from a defense industry conference in 2019, a group photo, Cutler near the edge, the kind of positioning of someone who attended events to collect information rather than to be seen. The other was a headshot on a now-defunct professional profile, the kind that people deleted when they decided their internet presence had become a liability. He had an unremarkable face, the kind that was designed, either by nature or effort, to be unmemorable. 50-ish. Pale eyes. The slightly softened look of a man who'd been behind a desk for the last decade, doing work that other people did physically. Logan stared at the headshot for a while. He wasn't afraid of Reese Cutler. He was aware of him, which was different and in some ways more useful than fear. Fear made you reactive. Awareness let you set the terms. He closed the browser and called Voss. It was 8:40 p.m. Voss picked up on the second ring. "You said 72 hours on the identification window," Logan said. "Is that still accurate?" "As of 6 p.m. it was," Voss said. "Nothing new since then. I want to move faster than a week." A pause. "On the job?" "On the Cutler problem," Logan said. "The job is separate. I haven't decided on the job yet." "Okay." Voss's voice shifted into something more operational. "What are you thinking?" "I want to know the moment he gets a name, not after the moment. I can set up a monitoring flag on his known network activity. If your name surfaces in his communications channels or his known data sources, I'll know within a few hours." A beat. "That's something I can do regardless of whether you take the contract." "Why would you do that regardless?" "Because it costs me relatively little, and it keeps you from becoming a problem that lands on my desk anyway, if Cutler does something messy." The honesty of it was characteristic of Voss in a way Logan was beginning to recognize, but not generous, just efficient. "And because I think you're worth the minor investment. I'm going to take that as a professional assessment and not read anything into it." "That's the correct read," Voss said. "Set up the flag," Logan said. "I'll call you by Friday on the job. I'll have it running by morning." Logan hung up and sat for a moment with the phone on the table. The apartment was quiet enough that he could hear the building's old pipes settling, the faint sound of a television through the floor from the apartment below, Ellie's slow, regular breathing through the partially open door down the hall. He thought about Cutler looking at that frozen frame on his monitor, the mid-step, the geometry of it, the thing that Voss had said a man with the right background could read like a page of text. He thought about, is he still operational, and the certainty with which the answer had come back. The answer was yes. Logan knew that. He'd known it the moment his hands closed on Tyler's wrist in the Forge Combat Academy, and his body moved before his brain had finished the question. Whatever he'd been trying to be for 3 years, the thing underneath it hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been waiting for him to figure out what to do with it. He got up and went to bed. Thursday came with the particular quality of Thursdays in November, a day that felt like the week was finally exhaling, the sky low and gray, but without the aggressive intent of actual weather. Logan completed his morning deliveries, picked up Ellie, helped her with her reading homework at the kitchen table, made dinner, and at 7:15 told Rosa where he was going in slightly more detail than he usually shared because it felt important to say it out loud to someone. "A veterans training group?" Rosa said, looking up from her textbook. "That's the shape of it." She looked at him for a moment in the way that young people sometimes looked at adults who were clearly about to do something they should have done a while ago. "That sounds good," she said simply, and went back to her textbook. He drove to Forge Combat Academy for the 3rd time that week, and this time he went in carrying nothing. The Thursday evening group occupied a separate training space at the back of the building, a room that shared a wall with the main gym floor, but had its own entrance, its own climate, its own specific gravity. 8 men when Logan arrived, ages ranging from late 20s to early 50s, a mix of builds, a mix of how they carried themselves, a mix of how much of what they were carrying showed on their faces. One wore a knee brace similar to the one Logan kept in his car. 2 had visible service branch tattoos. All of them registered his arrival in different ways. One looked up and looked back down. One offered a nod. One said, "Hey," without particular emphasis, and the rest let him exist in the room without making a thing of it. That last part, Logan thought, was the whole offering that Mercer had described. The not making a thing of it. Mercer himself was there, in training clothes, looking like someone who worked out alongside his program, rather than administering it from a distance. He found Logan near the door and said only, "Glad you came," and didn't ask any follow-up questions, which was correct. They trained for 90 minutes. It wasn't structured like a class. More like the kind of collaborative work that happened when a group of people who knew their individual capabilities spent time probing each other's training in the way that people who shared a common language could. Logan worked with a man named Darius First, a former Army Ranger about 4 years out, who moved with the dense efficiency of someone who'd been in CQB situations and had the specific pattern recognition that came from it. They went slow initially, which was its own kind of communication. An acknowledgement from both sides that the point wasn't to establish hierarchy, but to understand each other's vocabulary. Around the 40-minute mark, when they'd found a rhythm, Darius said quietly without stopping what they were doing, "You're Navy." 12 years. Special warfare. Not a question. Logan didn't confirm it explicitly. Darius took the non-answer for what it was and didn't push. "I was in Kandahar in 2011, Darius said. Third deployment." "I wasn't in Kandahar," Logan said. "No," Darius said. "I know. I would have heard." He paused. "I heard about a team that went into some places in 2012 and 2013 that we weren't supposed to be in. Nobody could confirm who. The results were notable." Logan stepped back and reset his stance. "Let's go again," he said. Darius met his eyes. Then he nodded, and they went again, and nothing more was said about it. And Logan understood that Darius already knew everything he needed to know. He drove home at 10 p.m. with his knee aching in a way that was different from the usual grinding ache. More like the productive soreness of something that had been used, which it hadn't been in a long time. He sat in the car outside his building for a moment with the engine off. His hands were still. He noticed that specifically, completely still on his thighs. No tremor, no restless repositioning, just still. He went upstairs and paid Rosa and checked on Ellie and went to bed and slept, without interruption, until 5:52 a.m., when his alarm went off and he had the specific disoriented confusion of someone who had not expected to sleep that soundly and wasn't entirely sure what to make of having done so. Voss called Friday morning at 7:18. "The flag triggered at 3 a.m., he said. Logan's hand tightened on the phone. "He has a name?" "Not yours." "Not yet." He ran a query on former Naval Special Warfare personnel with Ravenport area driver's license records in the last 3 years. The query didn't return a match because your license address is a P.O. box. A brief pause. "Which is smart. Did you do that intentionally?" "I did it because I move around and I didn't want to update my address every time," Logan said. "But I'll take the accidental competence." "The P.O. box buys you time, not immunity," Voss said. "He's going to move to a secondary search methodology, probably running the footage against facial recognition databases, which is a slower process and not guaranteed to surface you if you've been genuinely off the grid." "I have been." "Then you may be fine," Voss said, "but I want to put something in front of you and I need you to hear it without getting defensive." "I'll try." The most effective way to neutralize Cutler's interest is to make you publicly known and publicly uninteresting before he identifies you privately. Right now he wants you because you're a mystery. If the delivery driver from the viral video has a name and a face and a mundane civilian life, you become a story instead of an asset. Stories get published and forgotten. Assets get managed. Logan thought about this. "You're saying go public. I'm saying consider it. A single interview, a single statement. Something controlled and narrow that puts your name to the footage on your terms before he puts it there on his." Voss's voice was measured. "You control the narrative. You bore him. He moves on. And I lose the thing I spent 3 years building." "You lose the anonymity," Voss said. "Not necessarily the rest of it." Logan stood at his kitchen window. The morning light on Keswick Street was thin and cold, the kind of early November light that showed you the city without flattering it. "Let me think about it," he said. "Think fast," Voss said. "Not today fast, but fast." He thought about it for 2 days. On Saturday morning, he went back to Forge for the second Thursday and Saturday session and worked with a different man this time, a firefighter named Cal who had 2 tours in the Marines behind him and a way of being physically present in a room that Logan recognized as the kind that came from running into burning buildings as a professional activity. Cal didn't ask about Logan's background. He said, "I saw the video," in the same tone he might have said, "I saw it rain on Tuesday." And then they got to work, and Logan appreciated that it was possible to be known and still not made into a thing. On Sunday, he drove to the park near Ellie's school and sat on a bench while she attempted to establish diplomatic relations with a group of dogs whose owners were conducting what appeared to be an informal dog social event on the grass nearby. He watched her approach the largest dog, a golden retriever roughly her own size, with a seriousness of purpose that he found both familiar and deeply endearing, and he thought about Voss's suggestion. Public. Controlled. Narrow. He thought about what Ellie would see if she searched his name and found something her classmates had linked her to. He thought about the school pickup line and the way parents looked at each other and processed information about each other's lives. He thought about Rosa looking up from her textbook and saying, "That sounds good," in the way people said things when they meant it's about time. He thought about the frozen frame on Cutler's monitor, and the question is he's still operational, and the answer that had come back without hesitation. He thought about what it meant that the answer was yes, not as a threat or a resource, just as a fact about himself that he'd been trying to file somewhere out of reach, and that apparently had its own opinion about where it belonged. Ellie came back from the golden retriever with her hair disordered from enthusiastic petting and a look of complete satisfaction. "His name is Biscuit," she said. "That's a good name for a dog," Logan said. "I think so too." She sat on the bench next to him, leaning into his arm with the comfortable unself-consciousness of a child who took for granted that they were welcome there. She pulled Gerald out of her jacket pocket. She'd started carrying him in her pocket rather than her backpack, which was a developmental shift Logan had noted without comment, and held him in her lap. They sat for a while watching Biscuit navigate the social landscape of the dog gathering with an openness and lack of self-consciousness that Logan found instructive. "Dad," Ellie said. "Yeah, Ed. Are you still thinking about the thing?" He looked down at her. She was watching the dogs, not him, which was either coincidence or the particular emotional intelligence of a child who had learned that some conversations went better when they weren't direct confrontations. "What thing?" he said. "The thing that made your eye do the twitchy thing all week." He watched Biscuit attempt to make friends with a skeptical terrier. "A few things, actually," he said. "Are they getting better?" He thought about Thursday night, and his hands being still in the car. He thought about sleeping until 5:52 without waking up. He thought about Darius and Cal and the room at the back of Forge Combat Academy that had its own specific gravity. "Yeah," he said, "they're getting better." She leaned a little more into his arm. Gerald sat in her lap and stared forward with the serene blankness of a stuffed elephant who had been everywhere and was not troubled by any of it. He called Voss on Monday. "I'll do the Halcyon contract," he said. 2 days a week, defined scope, exactly what you described. Any deviation from the scope, and I'm out. That's not negotiable." "Agreed," Voss said. "Non-negotiable is fine." "And I'll do the interview," Logan said. "One outlet. Print, not video. I choose the journalist, I control what I confirm and what I don't. You get no input on the content. This isn't a Halcyon PR operation." "I wasn't going to ask for that," Voss said. "I know, I'm saying it anyway." "Fair." A pause. "One other thing. The insurance report that Forge's training director filed. Mercer told me it was withdrawn, but the carrier logged it. If anything formal comes from that direction, Mercer handled it," Logan said. "It's done." He heard Voss accept that without pursuing it. "Welcome aboard," Voss said, with the precise amount of warmth that a man like him applied to things. "Don't make it sound like a ceremony," Logan said. "Wouldn't dream of it." The journalist was a woman named Petra Halloran, who wrote long-form pieces for a national magazine and had a reputation for not sensationalizing things that didn't need sensationalizing, which was rarer than it should have been. They met at Kessler's gas station, Logan's choice, on a Wednesday afternoon, and she had a notebook and a small recorder that she placed on the counter and then asked permission to use, which was the first good sign. The piece she eventually wrote was called The Delivery Driver. It ran 4 weeks later. It was 3,000 words, of which Logan appeared in roughly half, and it was careful in the ways Logan had asked it to be careful and honest, in the ways that he'd decided were worth being honest about. It named him. It described his daughter in general terms, her age, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the stuffed elephant, without specifics that Logan hadn't approved. It described his service without describing his service, which was a writing achievement Logan found he could respect. It described the night at Forge Combat Academy from Logan's perspective, which was the first time the footage's subject had been attributed a perspective, rather than a technique. The piece's last paragraph was a direct quote, the only direct quote Logan had approved, and it read the way things read when someone said a true thing without trying to make it sound more true than it was. I didn't want anyone to see that footage. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was trying to finish my shift and get home. That's still what I'm trying to do, most days. The only thing that's changed is I stopped thinking those two things were in conflict with each other. The piece published on a Thursday. By Friday, Reese Cutler's monitoring flag had gone quiet. A story in a magazine was not an asset. Voss texted Logan a single line. He's moved on. Logan read it and put his phone in his pocket and went to pick up Ellie from school. Tyler Brooks read the piece 3 times. He'd been reading everything he could find about Logan Carter since the night in the gym, not obsessively, but with the specific intentionality of someone who understood they'd encountered a significant gap in their own education and was trying to address it. He read about naval special warfare. He read about the kind of close-quarters training that produced the footwork Mercer's training director had recognized. He watched the video, his video, the one he'd been in, fewer times now, and differently, less focused on the 3 seconds of technique and more on the 10 minutes before it. The patience, the repeated apologies, the deliberate, continuous choice to not be what the situation was trying to make him. He went to Mercer's office on a Friday afternoon and knocked on the open door. Mercer looked up from his desk. "I want to apologize to you," Tyler said. "Not to Logan, to you, for doing that in your gym, for making your gym the place where that happened." Mercer leaned back in his chair and looked at Tyler with the expression of a man who had been in the business of developing people long enough to recognize a real moment when it arrived. "Sit down," he said. Tyler sat. "What do you want to do with your career?" Mercer said, not accusatory, genuinely asking. "Win," Tyler said immediately. Then he heard how it sounded and adjusted. "I want to be good, actually good, not just technically." He stopped again. "I want to be the kind of person that someone like him would—" He stopped a third time and shook his head slightly. "I don't know how to say it." "You don't have to," Mercer said. "I understood you." He offered Tyler a position as a junior training assistant for the Thursday evening group, not as a member. He hadn't earned that, and they both understood it. As someone who showed up, paid attention, learned what people who had carried real weight actually looked like when they moved and trained and helped each other, Tyler said yes. He showed up the following Thursday in plain clothes, no academy branding, and stood near the back of the room and did exactly what Mercer had told him to do, watched and listened and kept his ego in his pocket, which was the hardest physical training he'd done in years. Logan was there. He acknowledged Tyler with a nod when he arrived and didn't make anything more of it. Tyler received the nod and didn't make anything more of it either. That was enough. For now, that was exactly enough. November moved into December with the slow inevitability of Midwest winters. The Halcyon contract started on a Wednesday. A training facility outside the city, a group of 12 security personnel who ranged from competent to overconfident in proportions, Logan found familiar, and a defined set of objectives that he could address without reaching into the part of his experience that he kept for himself. He worked 2 days a week. He delivered food the other days. He showed up on Thursdays and Saturdays at the back room of Forge Combat Academy and worked alongside men who understood the weight of what they carried and didn't need to explain it out loud. He found, slowly and without ceremony, that he was sleeping better. Not perfectly. He still had the 3 a.m. kitchen nights occasionally, still had the hands that moved on their own sometimes in the quiet moments after something activated the old circuitry. He'd probably always have those. The shrapnel in his knee wasn't going anywhere either. Some things became part of the architecture rather than the wound, and the distinction he was learning mattered. Ellie got the cinnamon ones for breakfast one Saturday morning. She ate them with the satisfaction of someone whose long game had finally paid off, and Gerald observed from his position against the juice glass, and the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling had been rearranged twice since Logan put them up, because she'd decided twice that the sky over Ravenport needed to be more accurate. On a cold Thursday evening in the second week of December, after the session at Forge had ended and most of the group had cleared out, Logan sat on a bench near the wall with a water bottle and his knee wrapped in a cooling pad he'd started bringing in a bag, and Darius sat on the bench next to him in the specific companionable silence of men who had run out of the need to fill space with words. After a while, Darius said, "You seem different than the first week." Different how? Logan said. Darius thought about it. Less like you're waiting for permission to be somewhere. Logan drank his water and thought about that for a moment. Yeah, he said. Maybe. He drove home through December streets with the heater on, the left vent blowing cold air the way it always did, and Ellie was asleep when he got in, and Gerald was present and accounted for. And the stars glowed on the ceiling in their approximation of the sky above a city where a man in a faded windbreaker had walked into a gym to deliver food and walked out having delivered, without intending to, a different kind of reckoning. To a crowd of fighters who'd thought they knew what strength looked like. To a young champion who had confused loudness with power. And to himself, who had spent 3 years trying to leave something behind and was only now beginning to understand that the answer was never to leave it, but to finally, carefully, choose what to do with it. He didn't need the recognition. He never had. He needed the thing that came after recognition. The ordinary morning, the cinnamon breakfast, the small hand in his on a cold sidewalk, and the knowledge that he had shown up for all of it, and would keep showing up, which was the only victory that had ever mattered, and the only one he intended to keep. The strongest thing a person can carry is the choice